Bills Mafia. That red light is on, which means this week's episode is live. For all of you in our comment section today, for all of you listening to us after the fact, I want to first and foremost say thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. My name is Joe DeRosa, and joining me today, as always, is an absolutely stacked panel of guests. And I'm going to give them the opportunity to introduce themselves, tell you what they have going on, where you can find them, all that good stuff. So, Kyle, we'll start with you. We'll go to Mike, and we'll get back to me. Let's go.
Hell of an intro. Hi, hello. My name is Kyle Salagi. I'm the host of co-host. I do something on the Cover One Roundup live every Monday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also edit for cover1.football, become a One Pass member, trying to get all the plugs in. And that's it.
And I'm Mike. I'm co-host of the Going Deep podcast Tuesday nights at 7 with Kevin right here on Cover One as well. And yeah, Joe, there's nothing much really else to add on top of that right now.
Well, gentlemen, I appreciate you joining the show today. Kyle, your first time here, so thank you for making the availability. Mike, as always, I appreciate you being here, taking some time out of what is going to be a very nice Saturday in Western New York and here in the city for all of us. So to take this hour to talk about our 5 most important players on the Bills defense. Now, last week, if you were able to watch, or if any of you were in the comments section last week, I did a show with Josh McCarty from Bills Chat where we talked about our 5 most important offensive players, as well as some honorable mentions. Really good discussion after the D-Hop hurricane ended. And we had some good input from the crowd. We had some good comments on the YouTube. It was a fun show, something that inspired me to continue this on with defense, when it all happened. Also, special shout out to Chet for the Let's Go Sports comment. That is absolutely let's go sports. But this week, we're going to be talking about our 5 most important players on defense, really just the people that, each of us feel are kind of the pivotal points that we need to rely on this year, people that we would be devastated if they went down, people that we think are going to have a huge role, especially with McDermott at the helm calling things potentially a little differently than last season. So Kyle, Mike, the way I want to do this is we each have our lists. I'll start with number 5. I'll let you guys say yours first. I'll go to me. And then before we get to 1, we'll do our honorable mentions. And then we'll talk about number 1 and why we think they're the most important. Feel free to go as long as you want. Whatever points you want to make, you are welcome to do here. So Kyle, I'll put you on the spot now. Give me your number 5 most important player on the Buffalo Bills defense.
First, I'm going to start with my honorable mentions, just so people kind of get the idea of who's being omitted from this list, because I have some pretty controversial honorable mentions, I would say. So coming in at like 7A and 7B are Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer.
Wow. That is controversial
for me. Coming in at number 6 is Tre'Davious White. So people aren't going to like this list. And coming in at number 5, the people, I can already tell the chat's not going to like this. They're going to be like, this guy's getting too cute with it. This guy, is trying to beat around the bush. And maybe I am. Maybe in hindsight, I will look back on this and be like, oh, that was kind of a reach. That wasn't great. But at number 5, I'm going with Taylor Rapp.
Oh, yeah. Taylor Rapp.
Y'all aren't going to like Cam Lewis at number 2. Let me tell you that. But no, Taylor Rapp. Do you want me to get into my points? Okay.
Absolutely.
So again, when he got signed a couple of months ago at this point, people were kind of just like, okay, he's a long-term successor for Micah Hyde or Jordan Poyer, one of the two. He is a very good depth option this season. And he is that. But once you actually look into stuff and look into the context, look into numbers, I think this dude is going to have a deceivingly big role. I think he is going to be used a lot more than people are currently anticipating. You look at just what he's done in LA, his 4 years in the league, especially the last 2, because I do believe he had an injury 3 years ago. But he has started 48 out of 57 games that he has played in his NFL career. Looking at last season, played on 95% of LA's defensive snaps. Looking at the year before, played on 96% of LA's defensive snaps. So this dude is a starter, right? This dude has started for a Super Bowl winning defense, started, playing safety. And I just find it hard to believe that, like, regardless of the succession plan, which I do think he is part of the succession plan, I find it difficult to believe that he would sign a 1-year, damn near league minimum deal to come and play in Buffalo. So, like, that just doesn't really add up. And again, early indications are, at least, what we've heard coming out of offseason workouts, is that there's a lot of Taylor Rapp. Like, Taylor Rapp is seeing more snaps than anticipated. And like, the reason why he sneaks in at number 5 on my list is just because he offers them something that they did not have before, right? He allows them to expand their defensive repertoire, allows them to shift philosophy a bit by allowing them to play more dime personnel, more 6 DB looks, which is something that they really didn't do last year and really haven't done a lot, because like it's a pretty unique personnel package, to be fair. But just like, this could be wrong. I fully admit that I am not the best user of sports info solutions, but when I tried to gather data earlier today, just looking into this, I figured out, or like, according to what I found, the Bills only had 6 DBs on the field for 15 snaps last year. I don't know how true that is. That could be completely wrong. It seems a little low, but in general, like, the point stands that they did not play dime a lot, just because who was their 6th DB? Saran Neal, who every time they put Saran Neal on the field, it was like, ooh, you can't have Saran Neal on the field. But just like, now you have a Taylor Rapp who you can have a 6th DB on the field, from time to time, or at least more than they have in the past. And then on top of that, like, we'll get into this later, I'm sure, when we're talking about other players and other positions. I think that this defense is really going to feel the absence of Tremaine Edmonds, especially early. So I think that you have Taylor Rapp, and that allows you to, again, not only shift philosophy, not only expand the playbook, but also take, from time to time, especially early, take off an inexperienced player who's starting at Mike, take him off the field from time to time completely, and just roll with, 6 DBs, roll with Taylor Rapp, who, again, plenty of starting experience, very talented player. And on top of all those points, he still is that depth option. Should something happen to Hyde or Poyer, who are aging and they have had injury concerns in the recent past. So again, with Taylor Rapp, you get not only that break glass in case of emergency, good starting safety, but you also get a shift in philosophy and an expanded playbook. So that's why he's number 5.
I like that. Mike, what do you got?
Yeah, first of all, Kyle, I love that you decided to take like 3 honorable mention players. So now I know I can name like the entire defense here.
Yes, exactly.
I'll steal your idea and go with some honorable mention as well. I'm going to have Daquan Jones as my first honorable mention player, and not because he's not a huge part of this defense, but more so because of the way the Bills play to the rotation with their interior D linemen. I don't know if I can have him in the top 5 at this moment in time, especially since he had a hell of a season last year, and it might be difficult to replicate what he did on the field going into this year. But still hell of a player. I'm going to go with another safety at number 5 for the most important defensive players on this Bills team this year. And I'm going to put Micah Hyde right there. And my reason being, I thought the Bills missed that security blanket at the back of their defense last year. And it really played an effect with the entire secondary. Last year was one of those, obviously Trey White wasn't 100% when he came back. And you're being forced to rely on guys like Dane Jackson and Kyer Elam and Christian Benford and a bunch of young corners. But last year was the first time in a while where you started seeing some cracks in the secondary. And I know the circumstances weren't the best for them, but having Micah Hyde healthy next to Poyer, I think will do wonders for the players in front of them. And I don't have all the advanced stats that you always get, Kyle, but just from a field test, I think having him back is going to make a tremendous impact on this defense going forward.
We got our first "What are we smoking?" comment, so I'm really proud of you guys. That took us like 10 minutes, but I love this. No, but in all seriousness, I can understand the points they've made so far. With Taylor Rapp, that's really interesting. You have him as number 5 because, again, I think it was RJ who mentioned the Raptor package. That's been a point of discussion on multiple shows and amongst our chat and really around the Bills community since they signed him, because they brought in another safety. You were asking why. We just brought Poyer back. We have Hyde. We have Hamlin, who's been trending to come back, now is confirmed to be playing again. And you had DeMarlo on the cusp. You figured he was coming back for super cheap. He did. So why Rapp? And then you start to think, well, if McDermott's taking over, maybe Rapp doesn't just play conventional safety. Rapp now comes up. It could be, like you said, like a dime linebacker, the Raptor package, as everyone's been calling it. Someone who can kind of be like of service to different parts of the secondary or within the front seven, which I think is absolutely useful. And one thing that I love about this concept, as you mentioned, is you said that the linebacker position, specifically Edmonds and the loss of him, is going to be glaring, especially in the first couple of weeks. I also think that's going to be true. But adding in Taylor Rapp, now maybe if you have this inexperienced linebacker, or maybe if you have, someone who's been in the system a few years but hasn't taken that role head on like Tyrell Dodson, now you're talking about adding in a guy who might be able to offset some of the coverage responsibility and now just keep it focused to what's up front. And if your D-line's healthy and able to penetrate, create some disruption at the line of scrimmage, now if the run is disrupted, now if the pass is, there's pressure on the quarterback, he's in position versus sitting on his heels like I felt like Edmonds was a lot of time. And that's not a knock on Tremaine Edmonds, because I feel like that's an indictment on your D-line. But now, instead of Tremaine Edmonds, who's an experienced vet dealing with that, you would have someone with less experience, which means Rapp could kind of offset some of that. So I do understand him being at number 5. He's not on my list. I would put him at like a distant honorable mention, because I feel like that's to be seen if that's actually happening or not, which is why I don't want to put too much importance on it. But if it does become that situation, then absolutely. And Mike, to your point, I mean, you mentioned Micah Hyde. He's actually on my list higher up. I think the safeties are a huge component of this defense, and I'll elaborate on that a little more. I don't want to spoil too much, so I would venture it to the point further otherwise. But I do think, you can make the argument that they're number 1 on the list as opposed to being in the honorable mention, just because when Hyde went down, again, you mentioned, we saw the cracks in the secondary. It wasn't pretty at times. I feel like Hyde would have been a stabilizing force, that even if a banged up Poyer was playing last year with the lateral meniscus tear and his elbow, you're still going to have some sort of balance there in the safety room that kind of makes things seem a little more, tight in pass coverage, where you're not going to have as many exposed passes, things up the middle that might get, run up on you just because you're missing your starting safety, and Hamlin's still getting acclimated. So I'll elaborate more on that later. My number 5 is Daquan Jones. And I know you mentioned like you could put him on here as in your honorable mention as well, but Daquan Jones for me is vital. I think when he went down, especially in that Bengals game, that was it. Like when I saw his name on the injury report, I knew this D-line was doomed. His presence in the interior is so vastly important, especially with the fact that I don't trust Jordan Phillips to stay healthy for a full year, and I don't trust Ed Oliver to be that guy if he's the one that's getting doubled. Daquan Jones is your stabilizing force in the interior D-line. He's going to bring pressure up the middle. He's going to make things easier for Ed and Greg, and he's going to make things easier for AJ, who's probably going to be taking over for Vaughn for a couple games, even though Vaughn says he's ready. He's great in the run defense, and he's great in pass. It's great as a pass rusher, even though he's not going to rack up a bunch of sacks. He brings that pressure up the middle that I think is vital for a D-line, especially a rotation-heavy one, where you can kind of bring him in and out and just get that production out of him and just cause disruptions. So for that reason alone, he's number 5. And if he stays healthy this year and you have him for the duration of a season, then I'm confident that interior D-line is going to be just as good as it was for that, call it first half of last year when he was mostly healthy, before Jordan Phillips combusted into thin air, before the Vaughn injury, before we had to kind of start relying on the secondary plan for defensive line. To me, it's Daquan Jones at number 5, clear cut. So, Mike, I'll swing it back to you. We'll go back to Kyle. What do you got for number 4 on your list?
So I do want to say one thing before we go to number 4 about the Taylor Rapp situation. I have heard they are planning to do more dime and have 6 DB looks this year, Kyle. So that definitely is an intriguing player to have on your list, because I don't think, obviously you don't bring in Taylor Rapp to just sit on the bench and do nothing, but all indications seem to be saying that he is going to play a decent role in this defense going forward. Number 4 on my list, I have Tre'Davious White. I think how he progresses from his ACL injury and what version of Trey we get this year might have the biggest impact on what level this defense can be in 2023. If Trey can come back and return close to the all-pro Tre'Davious White that we remember before the ACL injury, this defense could be elite. It could be one of the most dangerous defenses in the NFL. If we see the version of Trey that we saw last year going forward, they'll be good, but they won't be unstoppable at times. I think there's a lot to be paying attention to him early in training camp, preseason, seeing if he still has that burst, that ability to play with the top wideouts in the game, because none of us really know what to expect from Tre'Davious White at this point. There's a lot of people that are saying, well, with the extra year away from the injury, that he should be a top 10 corner. I don't know if you can guarantee that that'll be the case. And the difference between being a top 10 corner and being corner 25 and 30 in the league could make quite a difference with this defense. So I'm really intrigued to see how he'll be, especially since we don't know what's going to be across from him. Is it going to be Kaiir Elam to start the year? Will Christian Benford have a chance at getting that number 2 spot? Are they going to play it safe with Dane Jackson? I would put my money on Kaiir Elam being that guy, but there's a lot of uncertainty across from him. So the Bills are going to need Trey to at least step up to be an above average corner once again.
Mm-hmm. Kyle, what you got?
Daquan Jones and Tre'Davious White are players that hurt to stay off my list. It hurts to keep them off the list, especially when you consider my number 4 isn't even a player. There isn't even it's not one specific player, but it will ultimately be. My number 4 is whoever ultimately wins the starting middle linebacker job. As important as I think Taylor Rapp is going to be to this defense, as I just laid out earlier, and part of my reasoning was you can kind of ease in whoever starts at middle linebacker to that role because you can play more dime personnel early. I think that you can't live without a middle linebacker, especially in a Sean McDermott defense, right? Historically, the middle linebacker is a very important position, especially in a Sean McDermott defense. You think back to Carolina with Luke Kuechly, and you think back to Buffalo, right? Year 1, he has Preston Brown, who for all intents and purposes was a fine middle linebacker, right? Like as serviceable as they come. Sure tackler, nothing flashy, but a serviceable dude. And that wasn't good enough for Sean McDermott. So Bean trades up to get, the rangy athletic freak in Tremaine Edmonds. And you see how much that they put on his plate immediately, right? Giving him the green dot week 1. And he started every game he was healthy and played on damn near 100% of the snaps in every game he was healthy for the last 5 seasons. So the middle linebacker position, especially in a Sean McDermott defense, is incredibly important. And whoever is ultimately asked to start at middle linebacker for the Bills this season is going to be asked to do a ton, right? Because that's just what McDermott asks of his middle linebackers, right? On top of coverage, on top of playing, against the run, he's probably going to end up wearing the green dot, right? Because people have talked about the idea of Milano wearing the green dot. To me, that seems like something that we would have heard about by now. And it seems like something that maybe they would have tried earlier, right? Because Milano was showing flashes of being this guy after 2017. He was showing flashes of being this, and they didn't trust him. They did not trust him to transition to middle linebacker and wear the green dot. Now, obviously, things have changed since then. He's grown. He's transformed as a player a little bit. He's evolved, grown into his body, all that stuff. But just I don't know if at this point they would trust him to wear the green dot or if they want to have him wear the green dot. I don't know if they want to switch his responsibilities that much, given how important and how impactful he is in what he currently does. I'm sure we'll all get to Matt Milano later. But just again, on top of just on-field stuff, right, and play-wise, they're going to ask probably whoever starts at middle linebacker to wear the green dot and play regardless of how often they use the Raptor package, the middle linebacker is probably going to be on the field for the majority of snaps. So just looking into who this could ultimately be, the names right now are who, like Tyrell Dodson, Terrell Bernard, Balin Spector, like outside shot for Dorian Williams, maybe AJ Klein. I hope not, but just like in a lot of ways, the performance of this defense in general will largely mirror how well the middle linebacker experiment goes. And the reason why I don't have this higher up on the list is I think that they have enough talent around the defense. And I think McDermott, regardless of what people are going to say about McDermott, right? People, for some reason, don't like McDermott, a lot of people, but I think that he is crafty enough and I think he's smart enough to, if there is a deficiency at middle linebacker, I think that he can mask it in some ways. But just, yeah, at the end of the day, it is going to be important who starts there, who's wearing the green dot. If you ask me right now who I want it to be, it's either Terrell Bernard or Dorian Williams, just because like you watch Terrell Bernard's college tape. Eric Turner, a couple of months ago at this point, maybe even a year ago, just wrote an article kind of breaking down Terrell Bernard's college tape. Saw a lot of similarities to Matt Milano, just in terms of being around the ball, heat-seeking missile, right? Like that type of player. So like I like the idea of having two Matt Milanos on the field. And then Dorian Williams, again, gives you that. I don't think it's going to be him just based off of what we've heard from McDermott and Bean. But again, I like the coverage ability that he has. I like the wingspan that he has, right? You don't really lose much in the wingspan from Tremaine Edmonds to Dorian Williams. Unfortunately, I think it's probably going to end up being Tyrell Dodson. If I had to place money on it right now, I would probably put my money on Dodson. But again, whoever it ultimately ends up being is going to be important to the success of this defense.
Yeah, I would have middle linebacker on my list if I really knew who it was going to be. For me personally, because we don't have that identity yet, and because I think it's going to be a situation where you're adding in someone who's inexperienced, I think you're going to have to try and mask the deficiencies. And therefore, if you have a system or some sort of look or something you could get away with game by game that offsets that in a deficiency, then I wouldn't put it in my 5 most important. However, if we did end up getting that established starter and we saw how good they could be and how much they're dependent on, like we did with Tremaine Edmonds, they would absolutely be in my top 5. Before I go to mine, I actually want to pose or put up this question that Roy asked Mike specifically. Just having Trey at number 4, would you like the idea of extending him if cash is needed to sign someone, quote unquote?
So if there's a guy like DeAndre Hopkins and they needed to restructure him, I'd be open to that. But there's a lot of unknowns. We don't know what the Bills are seeing on a day by day in the locker room, on the practice field, how he is in his progression. If I knew what he was looking like out on the field, I could confidently say yes or no, but I just have no idea at this point. But it would depend on the type of player that you would be trying to bring in. If it's a rental player for a year that's middle of the pack, no, I'm probably not restructuring. But if you're getting a high level impact guy, aka DeAndre Hopkins, well then I could live with it a little bit more.
Yeah, and there was a point that I referenced last week that Nate made on Greg's show when they did the initial D-Hop discussion about him being released, and it's that you usually keep these things floating, like these types of restructures floating, if you need them, because obviously you're not going to restructure everybody and have that cap open. Like, you're going to use it as needed. And in the case of Trey White, I feel like they did the medical examination, or they sent his medicals out to try and just see if it was worth restructuring, if his knee's good, because he's apparently been looking good in OTAs. And now you're talking about the idea that he could potentially be restructured. But I think it's only going to be the case of, if they actually do it. And if they do, like Roy said, like, is it if someone's on the periphery, if we're actually looking at a player that this team could potentially sign, I think it's worth resigning or restructuring him, excuse me, just because I think I'm fully confident in Tre'Davious White this year. I really am. I think, he came off an ACL injury when he was coming off, basically a year of not playing football. He comes back. Obviously, he's not 100% what he once was, but that's because, one, the mental hurdle of getting over an ACL tear when you're playing a position as volatile as corner, where you're going to have to cut and adjust your position and constantly move around the field on that same knee that you blew out a year prior. And two, the physical component. He's been in the weight room, he's been in practice, but he hadn't been playing a game. So naturally, that's going to take some time to come back from. I'm fully confident in Tre'Davious White returning to form. I'll get more into it in a little bit. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. But I think restructuring him would be something that would be a sound idea, assuming that there's someone you would need to actually restructure him for. My number 4 is Matt Milano. And we're going to continue on to this linebacker discussion. So Matt Milano, obviously, it goes without saying, top 5 player every year for this defense. He's vital to this defense. He's the weak side linebacker. And for me, I think it's more to do with the idea that, again, his importance lies not just in how much of a presence he is, not lies just how much he affects pass coverage, how much he affects in the run defense, how good he is when he rushes one of the gaps. It's more to offset that loss of that middle linebacker, like you guys referenced. When we're talking about this tandem or this rotation of potential guys that's going to fill at the Mike role, to me, Milano is that stable. I keep using this term, stabilizing presence, but honestly, it's the best one I could think of because it reigns true for every position of importance. Someone that you know has played this for a few years, someone that you have full confidence in, someone that can do multiple things in his role and do them exceedingly well. Matt Milano is important to this defense as a whole, but also to aid in the development of this middle linebacker, to help this person kind of get the transition into their role, to be someone that he could trust when they're lining up next to him. Because if Milano's taking care of his side and your role is limited to what the coach is telling you to do, nothing too crazy. Maybe you have Rapp and Milano at your helm and you're talking about, hey, just be there up top, just be there to stop the run, just help this. Like, to me, if you're limiting the role of the middle linebacker, it becomes even easier to do that if you have someone like Matt Milano next to you, healthy on the field, who's able to pull his role with that consistency that you've seen over the past few years. So for me, he's a clear-cut number 4. The only reason I don't have him higher is because I feel like there's just a couple of players that, to me, leave more of an impact. And I also feel like if we have these guys like Dorian Williams, as you referenced, Kyle, or maybe you could even talk about Terrell Bernard, that let's just say Matt Milano goes down for a game or two, I'm actually kind of excited and somewhat confident to see how these guys would fill in his role. They're fast torpedo types of linebackers. That's exactly what Milano is. I think we've kind of established depth behind him should he go down. Now, I don't want him to. Matt Milano, to me, is still the best of the position. But I feel like if he were to go for a couple of games, we have someone that can at least hold it down to a stable level while he recovers, which is why he is my number 4 on this list. So I will turn it back over to you, Kyle, if you want to give me your number 3 most important defensive player.
Again, people might not like this, but because I reading the comments, I've seen a lot of this player in just outside the top 5 or honorable mention, but I'm going with Greg Rousseau because yes, he is one of the best run defenders on this team already, which is especially surprising when you consider that like he has only played defensive end for 3 full seasons. If you remember, he was recruited to Miami as a wide receiver / safety. He was an athlete. And then they were like, you're actually a defensive end. Put on weight, bud. So he did. And again, he played 14 games over 2 seasons at Miami. One of the seasons he played 1 game. Then 13 games were in his next season. So 1 full real season at defensive end in college, had 15.5 sacks. And then he took the year off for COVID or sat out for the year. Which was well documented why he did that and all that. But again, and then he's played 2 seasons in the NFL. So he has played this position for 3 years, and he is already incredibly refined and incredibly reliable in run defense. And we have also seen those flashes as a pass rusher, right? Again, they're kind of not as consistent maybe as you would want, but we have seen the flashes as a pass rusher from Greg Rousseau. So what he is right now is just like a very, very good player, right? I would even go as far as to say he is a B+ player right now. Like he is incredible value for what they got at pick 30 in round 1 of the 2021 draft or whenever it was, right? Like they have gotten value out of Greg Rousseau. But for me, it's just like if he is going to build upon that strong foundation that he has laid and become a very impactful player, become a, really good, or he is a really good player, if he's going to become a great player, this is the year in which he's going to take that leap. Can he take a step forward as a pass rusher this season? Can he become a pass rush driver and pass rush generator as opposed to a pass rush benefactor, right? Because, look, he had 8 sacks last year. Can he push it to 10, 11, or 12? And you think back to when he was impactful as a pass rusher, it was largely when Von Miller was on the field, right? Like when the Bills had to rely on Greg Rousseau to be a pass rush generator, the pass rush largely, wasn't all that impactful, largely did falter. So that's why, and you talked about earlier, Joe, with Von Miller. Von Miller says he's going to be back. Von Miller just says shit is the thing. Von Miller just likes to talk, right? Maybe he's back week 1. I would say he probably will not be back week 1. So I think that they are going to have to rely on Greg Rousseau, at least for a portion of this season, to drive the pass rush, which is why he's so important this season, because not only are they going to rely on him to be at least their best run stopping edge guy, their best run stopping defensive end, if not one of their better run stoppers in general, they are going to, for at least a portion of the season, ask him to be a primary pass rusher, which is something that when asked about before, he hasn't really been able to do. And again, I think he can do that, right? Dude's 6'7", dude's an athletic freak. Dude has all the ability in the world, all the potential, all the talent in the world, and we've seen it in glimpses. It's just, this is the year in which, if he's going to put it all together, this will be the year, and this is the year that they need him to put it all together. So that's why he's number 3.
And this is a good comment by RJ. Groot is one of the best run defenders at defensive end in the NFL. I also think if he didn't get injured last year, he would have had double-digit sacks, and I completely agree with that, because you would have had a couple more games with Vaughn on the other side of the line. He got hurt in that Jets game, and I think that was week 6 or 7. It was post-bye. I do recall that. I was at that game. Hooray. Fun. Yeah, that was literally the worst day of my life. Anyways, so yeah, he goes down with that injury. If he stays healthy and you have Vaughn and the interior still relatively healthy, then you're talking about a Rousseau season that has maybe 10, maybe 11, 10 and a half sacks. And I think when you look at year 2 of Greg Rousseau, that's a very valid point to make about his development. I think he's developing well. I also think, like you said, 6'7" project defensive end that's been playing the position for less than 5 years. That goes without saying that he needs to, continue to develop, and it's going to take time with someone that is as essentially unrefined as Greg Rousseau, and yet it's starting to work. So I'm excited to see his year 3. I'll spoil it that he's one of my honorable mentions for that same reason you listed, like another pass rusher that you just need to continue this kind of dominance on the D-line, especially if Vaughn is unable to go when the season starts. So Mike, what do you got for number 3?
So we're getting to the point where we're going to start repeating other people's choices, and that's inevitable. I'm not going to give away some of them, but my number 3 is Matt Milano. I was considering naming the middle linebacker to be determined in this spot, but ultimately the reason why I stayed away from that is, without knowing who that player will be, how can you really say that they'll be one of the 5 most important? What you're essentially saying is, because of the uncertainty of the position and the importance of the position, that any person that gets named the starter is going to have that value spot in our rankings. But as we've all mentioned, there's so much talent on this defense that I think they can mask one spot that might be a slight deficiency. And with they can either do that with scheme or just overall ability surrounding them. And that's a big reason why I also have Matt Milano at number 3. You have an all-pro linebacker already that can handle a ton of responsibility, who's coming off the best season of his career. Milano is now one of the faces of this defense. In previous years, you would think of the secondary guys, Trey, Micah, Jordan. Obviously, when you bring in a guy like Von Miller, he automatically becomes one of your faces. But Milano is right up there with all of them right now. Sorry about that. And for this Bills defense to continue playing at the level that they they have been in the last couple of years, Milano's going to have to take a lot of responsibility to control that middle of the field, and we'll see what happens with his linebacker counterpart. Like you said, Kyle, it looks like right now it's a three-way competition between Dodson, Bernard, and Spector for that spot. We'll see how that eventually ends up developing. Right now, we're talking about OTAs. We haven't even seen a snap in training camp. A lot can change during those weeks in Rochester. At this moment, I'm still thinking it's Dodson, who is probably going to get the start at the beginning of the year, but who knows? Maybe Bernard can work his way into that. Maybe Dorian Williams with a strong camp can enter the conversation. But to me, Milano is a great counterpart for whoever will be in that spot. And not only will you rely on him to continue doing the things he did, but I think he's a good mentor and will be someone that will help ease whoever will be next to him.
Yeah, again, a point that I agree with. I said it earlier. Matt Milano is going to offset some of that. I guess you could call it drop off that's going to be at the middle linebacker position, assuming that there's a transition period for whoever takes that role on. I want to address one comment real fast, and that's Roy's waiting for Epineza to be on someone's honorable mentions list. He's not on mine. He's not on my list at all. I don't know if he's on either of your guys' lists. Do either of you got Epineza here?
Spoiler.
Really?
No.
Really? Oh my God. You had me going. No, listen, Kyle, with the way your list is going, that would not have surprised me at all. And that's not an insult.
Definitely never been on the roundup before.
No.
So I was going to say number one, that'd be nuts. But unfortunately, he's not on my list. I do think Epineza will play an important role, but that role is probably going to be for a few weeks. And I think Miller comes back, and I think Epineza will just continue to be a rotational D end. If Miller doesn't end up coming back as soon as we hope, then I'll put more stock into the Epineza train. But to be honest, to me, at this point, I thought he had a better year last year. He is improving ever so slightly, but I'm going to be more on the betting side that he doesn't kind of rise to the position we've all hoped he was when he was drafted. I think that's just what it is now. But you listen, 10 plus sacks, prove me wrong.
10
I
plus
say
sacks. More like 10 plus snacks on the bench.
Listen, I am one of those people that says it every week. No personal vendetta. I want these players to shut me up, make me look like an idiot. I'm fine with it because you know what that means? It means they're doing well and the Bills are winning games. That's fine by me. Make me look stupid. That's all good. I do a good job of that already, but continue that. My number 3 is Tre'Davious White. We have flip-flop, Mike. We are essentially trading blows like Rocky and Apollo here. Tre'Davious White is my number 3 because Tre'Davious White, but he is the right guy to play this position. He's an all-pro corner. He was so heavily relied on in that great 2019 and his 2020. When he got hurt, it obviously, you saw the defense kind of hold up as best as they could, but you missed his presence when you got to the playoff game, especially against the Chiefs, where you had the potential to have him kind of shade Tyreek Hill or maybe be on Kelsey for certain plays, and it just didn't work, and it felt like there was no way to stop Kansas City's offense. He goes down. You have a young corner room that kind of had some mixed development with Benford and Elam, but ultimately we were all waiting for Trey White to come back to man that cornerback one position to, again, be a stabilizing presence in the cornerback room. He is one of the best corners in the league when he's healthy. I said it before. I think he's going to return to form. I'm very confident in him doing so. I think your division has gotten a lot tougher. I think there is some very, very talented receivers that you're going to have to be playing twice a year. And if rumors are true as of this morning and the Patriots are in the driver's seat to try and make an offer for DeAndre Hopkins and that man is playing in Foxborough, congratulations. You have another receiver you have to worry about, along with Tyreek Hill, along with Jalen Waddle, along with Garrett Wilson, Alan Lazard. You keep naming them. There's a lot of them to deal with in this division. And obviously Trey, he's not going to be on top of them all. That's unrealistic. They're going to have a plan for him in each game. However, I want an all-pro corner to be there playing up to form to make sure that whatever matchup he has makes things easier for the rest of the passing defense, to make it easier for our defensive line, to give time, to make the quarterback have to hold on to the ball for a little bit longer because it will go a long way, especially if the line is healthy. That is why Tre'Davious White is my number 3 on this list. I think he is invaluable to the secondary. I think we still have a few good years out of him. I know the knee injury has swayed a lot of people's opinions on him. I know people saw him come back and not be 100% of what he was and think maybe he's washed. No, just no. I am putting so much stock into Tre'Davious White this year. I think he's coming back fully healthy, galvanized, ready to go, and we're going to see a big year out of him, and it's going to be very important that he is because he is very relied on in the secondary. That is my 3. Mike, number 2.
So for my number 2, Kyle stole a lot of my thunder, and I really didn't expect him to name Greg Rousseau as his 3rd most important player on the Bills defense, because I had him as my number 2 most important player on the Bills defense this year. And I thought I was going to be the only one on this panel today to have Greg Rousseau on our list. So I'm a little disappointed in him, but I guess I've spent too much time on the roundup in recent months.
Hey, I'm a good influence.
We're starting to sink our minds. I think I have a little bit different reasoning for why I have him at number 2. A big reason why I put him at 2nd is we don't know when Von Miller is going to return to the field. Maybe it's week 1 for the season opener. Maybe it's week 7 or 8 at midway through the season. But if Von is going to miss some time, the Bills are going to need Rousseau to step his game up to another level and help this pass rush out. Rousseau historically has been more of a person that cleans things up than he does get that burst off the line. Even at Miami, when he had 15 sacks, the reason why he dropped to late in the 1st round, a lot of people were saying he's not the guy that gets that initial burst. When the quarterback steps up, he cleans it up, he gets the sack that way, which there's nothing wrong with that. But you also need a little bit of that burst to create the pressure, the problems and stuff like that. So Rousseau, we already know, is tremendous as a run stopper at defensive end. We've already had the comment earlier in the chat room. I'm confident he's going to be a good player. He already is a good player. When we talk about being missing on defensive ends, we're more so talking about fans for the most part are talking about Epineza and Basham. Groot was not one of those misses. If anything, he's been a hit so far, and a guy that I'm confident is part of their long-term plans. And another reason why Bills fans need to hope that he takes that next level up, we don't know what version of Von Miller we're going to see when he does come back. You're talking about a 34-year-old coming off his 2nd ACL injury. We're all hoping that Von will be 90% of what we're used to. But what if he isn't? Then you have a real problem at edge rusher where you're going to need your young guys to bring something that they haven't in the past. Now, you guys mentioned how Greg Rousseau nearly had double-digit sacks last year. Let's be real. He was going to get double-digit sacks if he played the full season. He missed some games, ended up with 8. And then he was also dealing with the high ankle sprain late in the year. And that's an injury as a defensive end that will reduce your overall impact on the field. And I think once that happened, that's when that combined with Von Miller going out, the pass rush just completely disappeared at that point in the season. A healthy Greg Rousseau, I think, is a guy that you'll never really expect 14, 15 sacks, but I do think it's reasonable to expect 8 to 10 sacks a year out of a guy like that while being good in the run game. So for that reason, he's number 2 on my list.
All right. What you got, Kyle?
It's a crazy comment. That's
which one? This one?
The Sal one.
Yeah, the most important part this year is coaching. I soured on McDermott when he insisted playing Peterman. Couldn't figure out Josh was going to be great. Then fast forward to the Houston playoff game. Well, I mean, it was a rookie. When he was a rookie, we didn't want to throw him in the fray right away. I remember that discourse vividly. We were very careful, but unfortunately, Peterman was just that bad, and it was really kind of a lost year. And Josh got his start. He got his shot, and he wasn't.
Do we remember Josh as a rookie? He was.
Yeah, he
crazy.
Yeah.
Until he got hurt. Like, Josh Allen getting hurt was probably the biggest blessing the Bills ever had. Because can you imagine what the storyline would have been going into year 2 if Josh threw for like 13 touchdowns and threw for like 21 interceptions as a rookie? We would have been scared out of our mind. After he sat on the bench for that month plus behind Derek Anderson, and then Matt Barkley had his performance, Josh came back and he looked solid, at least halfway decent during that stretch. Yeah. But who knows if that would have happened without that time on the bench to learn.
Yeah, I distinctly remember the best throw of the first few weeks of Josh Allen's career was like a 20-yard pass to Kelvin Benjamin in the Houston game, which, like, yeah, that was good, but he was a rookie. He was still very, very unpolished. I think
Remember
the
that Green Bay
decision.
game against
Oh,
Rodgers?
yeah, yeah.
I know.
He was not ready. He was not ready to
No.
start. And I think he was thrown into a position where Peterman was just that bad. And I get the idea that, oh, it's Nate Peterman. Why would you even have him play? Because you didn't want Josh to play. The whole idea was that was a development year for him. If he had to play, it was because someone got hurt or because it was just so bad, like so astronomically bad that he had to step in. And that's what happened. That Baltimore game was so disastrous that he needed to step in. And honestly, Peterman for 90% of the Houston game was fine until the pick six at the end. So I'm one of those people who always felt like Peterman was bad, but Peterman wasn't the worst quarterback the league's ever seen. He just don't ask him to do too much, make him be a game manager. Unfortunately, when you're the
round pick.
Well,
yeah.
Joe, it doesn't help that like in every single clutch situation he's ever been in, he throws an interception. Like the Jacksonville playoff game, he comes in for a series, interception.
Right.
5 interceptions in the first half against the Chargers. Then
that was
the
bad.
The Houston game, he leads them on a go-ahead touchdown. And
Right.
how does that game
Yeah.
end? He throws an
Yeah.
interception for a pick six, and
And
So-
again, like, sorry to cut you off, Mike, but like, we're forgetting this is all revisionist history. Like, people doing this in chat. They didn't want Peterman to start either. They signed AJ McCarron. AJ
Right.
McCarron was supposed to be the starter. He lost the job in preseason, and like, he was supposed to be the mentor. Right, he was supposed to kind of help Josh along into the NFL, and then when it became clear he wasn't starting, he was like, "I don't want to be a third round. I don't want to be a third string quarterback." So they traded him, right? And just like it didn't go as they planned. So then halfway through the season, they figure out we need mentors. They get Derek Anderson and Matt Barkley. Again, is that not good coaching? Is that not good management?
I think we're getting
figuring
trolled
out?
right now because
I think I love this comment though. This is I just want Sal to know he got us if he is trolling. He did it. He did his job. Good job. You excellent Saturday morning trolling, but this is a funny comment. I can't lie. Couldn't see Josh tremendous talent. Like I read that with
traded
like
up twice in the first round to get to number 7 to pick him.
Yeah. I think we saw his tremendous talent. I just don't think we wanted to start him when we did, but the hand was dealt so poorly that we were like, all right, well, McCarron wasn't good. Peterman's got to take this for now. Peterman's that bad. Okay, fine, Josh, have fun. Oh, God, he's really not ready at all. He gets hurt. The season's lost. We all knew it when Derek Anderson was playing snaps. It is what it is. It happens. Let's be thankful we're out of those dark times. And let's move on with our list. So I completely lost my train of thought. Mike, did you just give yours, or Kyle, did you just give yours?
I just went to Greg Rousseau, so it's time for your number 2.
Okay, all right. So it's my number 2 or Kyle's number 2?
Your number 2.
Okay.
I have not given my number 2 yet.
Oh,
all right. So it's Kyle's number 2. That's why I was.
It really doesn't matter because we
look at what this devolved into.
Welcome to a podcast that I'm on. Right? It's never going to go well.
I love it.
No. Yeah, we've talked about this dude. He's been on both of your lists already, so we can kind of just glance over it. My number 2 is Matt Milano. Arguably has been the most consistently impactful defender of the Sean McDermott era. I would make that argument, right? Ever since he took over at weak side backer for Ramon Humber in 2017, Matt Milano has been a consistent difference maker. When he's on the field, you feel his presence. And when his hamstrings decide they don't feel like working, you can tell he's not on the field, right? So like that is why Matt Milano is so important. And everything you guys have said, just in terms of what he brings on the field in coverage against the run, what he's going to do for whoever starts opposite him at middle linebacker this year, right? Like what Milano is able to do is going to be able to take some stuff off the plate of whoever starts at middle linebacker, all that stuff, right? Like we all know how impactful, how good, how important Matt Milano is. Mm-hmm. There are a couple of things I do want to bring up, though. Concerns, if you will. He and Edmonds have always been a very fun and complementary duo. It's going to be interesting to see how Milano adjusts to life without Edmonds, right? Because like that's been one of the things that people have kind of talked about over the years is just like Milano can kind of do a lot of the stuff that he does and get away with a lot of stuff that he does because Edmonds is there. So like now that Edmonds is not there, look, I don't think it's going to impact his game too heavily, but I do think, I'm just intrigued to see how it impacts Matt Milano's game. And again, we talk about Taylor Rapp potentially a Raptor package, increase usage in 6 DB looks and dime personnel. Those may and likely will leave Matt Milano as the only linebacker on the field, which like there are very few linebackers that I would rather have on the field. If I'm only having one on the field in the entire league, very few I'd rather pick over Matt Milano. But again, we'll see, that's some more on his plate. We'll see how he would deal with that. And then again, I mentioned his hamstrings. He played most of the season last year, I do believe, but just like, dude has some injury history, right? Like I think I've said that he has the world's least reliable hamstrings, which he does. He has missed a lot of time with hamstring injuries in the past and just various lower body injuries. So again, those concerns aside, he's very good, very important. Number 2.
His comment section's great today. You guys are giving me some ammo here. I love this. But I actually do want to refer to this one because we're talking about linebackers. Thoughts on Babbich's comment that you want to match up linebackers. I actually really liked hearing from Babbich. I had a good time listening to what he had to say between this comment, but there was one I actually was going to make a reference to, and that's when he was talking about playing to your size and talking about kind of like it's not about how much you weigh or like the shadow that's on tape, but how are you playing based on your size. I thought that was interesting because we've been talking about OTAs. We've been talking about Tyrell Dodson, Terrell Bernard, all of these guys that we think are going to take middle linebacker. But one of the things that was, in my opinion, one of the bigger talking points surrounding Dorian Williams when he was drafted was about his size. It was like, oh, he's not 6'5", 200 whatever pounds. He's short. But like then we talk about, well, how McDermott in Carolina ran the kind of a linebacker system that, Kuechly, but then you had 2 guys who were 6'1". I think that's something you need to pay attention to when we get into training camp, because OTAs to me, hooray, they're playing, they're on the field, they're having a good time. Social media can post things. That's awesome. We can have some discussion. But training camp's when it matters. When those pads come on, that's when it matters. Like Aaron Quinn always says, like a bunch of guys says, I'm going to value reps when we get to training camp. When we get to training camp, I want to see if Dorian Williams is still what they're saying, like, he's just going to be like weak side, maybe to start out, or if he's taking middle linebacker snaps. Because I think there's a realistic chance that Babbich sees what he can do, even with his size, because one of the things is that his wingspan, like you mentioned earlier, Kyle, like how he can play up to that size. I think that's going to matter, and I think they're going to give him shot to get to that middle linebacker position sooner rather than later. I think they're going to put more stock into the guys they took higher in the draft and see what they have. And if it doesn't pan out, if they look bad in camp, that's when they're designated to the role that, maybe special teams or maybe weak side depth. But I think we should pay attention to Dorian Williams a little bit more if we're talking about the middle linebacker conversation. The linebacker discourse has been fluid as hell since this draft has happened. I feel like we've been told a million different things because no one's really sure of what's going to happen yet. And I think training camp is going to be indicative of what we're going to see out of the middle linebacker room. So that's my take on Babbich. I apologize for tailing off on that. My number 2 are actually 2 people merged into one. The safety tandem, Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde alike.
That's cheating, dude. That's a little bit of cheating. I know this is your show. Not fair of me to call you out, but that's
I did put the Mike competition for my number 4.
Right.
So.
Come on, he put committee.
More leeway for you.
Mike, you almost put TBD. You almost put down TBD. I think that kind of is in the same ballpark. Listen.
That's fair. If I call you out, you can call us out. That's fair.
Listen, it's all love here. Am I cheating? Sure. Do I care? A little. Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde together. It was hard for me to pick one over the other, which is why I have both. I think we missed Micah Hyde last year, as I said before. I think his presence was missed. I think, again, stabilizing force in the safety room, what he brings to the defense, his ability to cover, his ability to sniff plays out, to be able to help guys get into position, to be able to know where that ball is going. I mean, I think a lot about, like, if you had to sum up Micah Hyde in one play, it's the Patriots interception in the playoff game, because I don't think anybody else makes that play but Micah Hyde. And that was because he knew where that ball was going, because he's that intelligent as a safety. Jordan Poyer, again, the bruiser safety, the reinforcement in the secondary, the reason we've won games in the past, especially this past season. You could think of the Baltimore game with the 2 interceptions, including essentially the game-sealing one. them together as a tandem being on the field at the same time is invaluable to this defense. It's something that we rely on heavily. They are so smart in the secondary. They're able to put people in the right spot. They're able to know where the ball's going. They're able to work with each other, to not have to be too reliant on communicating every little thing because they just know the way each other play. They've referred to it before. To me, if you have these guys on the field at the same time, it makes your defense better as a whole. And for me, that's why they are my number 2 on this list. Again, this has been one of the best safety duos in the league, 2 all-pro guys. How can they not be that high up on your list? I ask, as they're not high up on either of your lists. But for me personally, it just matters so much to me that these 2 guys could stay on the field. I was devastated when Hyde went down. I think you saw some situations, especially the Miami game, and especially like certain times throughout the season where maybe that safety, like if it was Hamlin or if it was some of the even deeper depth, wasn't in the best position. Cam Lewis on Justin Jefferson, I'm pretty sure he was playing safety in that game. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But like those are examples where I feel like if you had Hyde on the field, these plays don't happen. The defense is a little bit more tight. The pass coverage is a little more tight. The team looks better as a whole. They are my number 2. Now, you guys have essentially given me your honorable mention. So before we go to number 1, do you have any other players before your number 1 that you want to mention today?
For an honorable mention, I will say Ed Oliver. He'll be my 7th most important player on the Bills, since we've already seen Joe's 6 most important players and Kyle 5 plus.
5 plus 3 plus the one that I'm gonna name.
We said like not 20 players or not like 25. We said like 30
every single player on the Bills defense.
That's my plan.
That way we're correct at the end of the year. No, I do think Ed Oliver is going to have a good year. A motivated Ed playing in a contract season. I think as an honorable mention, he's a guy that could have a much better year than what fans' expectations for him are at the moment. I feel like this fan base has given up on him because they're frustrated that he hasn't developed into this Pro Bowl caliber D tackle that many expected he would be with being a top 10 overall pick.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is that is still a solid player overall. And if you do have him playing with extra motivation to secure a nice contract at the end of the season, I think he could be a 5 to 7 sack guy, D tackle, if he takes his play up to another level.
Yeah, future Houston Texan, Ed Oliver, for sure. I like Ed Oliver, right? I will praise Ed Oliver every opportunity I get, though I am not including him as one of my honorable mentions. Just like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of the critique against Ed Oliver is just so disingenuous, right? Just like, what are the critiques? They're largely like, oh, he's not living up to pre-draft hype, right? Like people said he was going to be Aaron Donald and he's not Aaron Donald. People said he was going to be John Randall and he's not John Randall. Well, John Randall's a Hall of Famer. Aaron Donald's the number 1, right? Probably, or he will go down as one of the greatest defensive players, probably the greatest defensive tackle in NFL history. Yeah, okay, Ed Oliver's not that, but what he is a very solid player. And again, people get mad that again, he's not living up to that 9th overall pick status. And it's like, it's year 5 at this point, right? Like, it's a sunk cost. He is what he is. And what he is a very reliable, I shouldn't say very reliable.
People act like he sucks, though, which is
he's not. He does not suck.
He had 5 sacks as a rookie D tackle. So, like, Ed is who he is. But the question is there another level that he can get to? And because I feel like a lot of people assume that, at least fans, I don't know if this is all true or not, but a lot of fans, I think, believe that Ed doesn't bring it on a play-by-play basis. And who knows what's happening behind the scenes. All I'll say is this. Ed is a solid player. I do think there's room for him to grow. And we'll just have to wait and see. If he comes out this year and is extra motivated, there might be room for him to bring it to another level. And then you have the whole dilemma. Do you give him the money at the end of the season?
Oh, God.
And then we'll have the Tremaine Edmonds situation again, where fans are going to be saying, oh, you got to keep him, but then do you keep him at $15 million a year, or do you let him walk, and then he'll probably, like you say, go somewhere like Houston that'll just give him what he wants.
That's his hometown too. For my other honorable mention, again, I'll just quickly get into this because we're an hour deep on this show. We haven't done number one yet. No, I think it's all shaping up for us to have the same number one, so that should be a relatively quick chat. Taron Johnson. I'll give Taron Johnson flowers whenever I can give Taron Johnson his flowers. Joe, you talked about Bobby Babbitt's comments, just about like it's not really about your size, it's about the size that you play at, right? Like it's about playing up to size. Taron Johnson has been the epitome of that since he's been in the NFL. Dude's like 5'10", maybe like 190 something pounds. Dude plays a lot bigger than that. Sorry, there's a lawnmower outside my house right now if you guys could hear that. But Taron Johnson, very important to this defense, just again, given how much nickel they play. And again, we talk about them playing dime this year. Taron Johnson's still going to be on the field. He is very important to what this defense can do. Doesn't quite sneak into the top five or really the first wave of honorable mentions, but still an important player nonetheless.
And can I say one thing before we go to our number one overalls, which I'm assuming we all have the same person?
Mm-hmm. Probably.
Doesn't it say something about the Bills coaching staff and their defensive philosophy that after being nickel for as high of a percentage as they were last year, then now we're talking about them implementing dime more into their strategy? What this tells me is the Bills could give two craps how teams run the ball against them. Like at the end of the day, they are a modern analytic-based defensive philosophy. You want to run on us, average 4.5 yards per carry? Go ahead. Try to sustain 10-plus play drives over the course of 60 minutes and try outscoring us that way when we have Josh Allen. Now, if the Bills didn't have Josh and they weren't able to put 28 points per game on the scoreboard, maybe they would be more of a more routine defense where you do have to try to focus on stopping the run. But as long as the Bills have this high-scoring threat offense, I think it's really revealing that they're basically saying we're going to play coverage 90% of the time. In getting a guy like Taylor Rapp is just doubling down on it, because essentially what you're going to have Rapp and Taron Johnson, they're playing linebacker half the time. Like we always talk about, the linebackers are Milano and, well, it was Edmonds, but essentially Taron Johnson, part of his role as a nickel corner is to play up. And same thing with Taylor Rapp. And now they can bring more confusion to it. And then you think about the linebackers too that the Bills have drafted in recent years, with Terrell Bernard, Balin Spector, now Dorian Williams. Smaller, quick guys that are decent in coverage. To me, even at linebacker, the Bills are saying coverage is a very, very, very important aspect. So it's kind of funny because I remember the games against Green Bay and in some of the games where they struggled against the run last year, where people I would work with and different people in town would be like, they got to find a way to stop the run. They got to get more physical at the line of scrimmage. And the Bills coaching staff basically this offseason doubled down on saying, like, no, we really don't think that's the problem. We're going to actually focus more on stopping the pass, because the teams that beat us are the Joe Burrows of the world, are the Patrick Mahomes of the world. And it would be nice to be able to stop Joe Mixon once in a while. But at the end of the day, stopping Joe Mixon isn't how you beat the Bengals. It's stopping Joe Burrow. So
yeah. I agree with that point. To an extent, I do think there is, and not saying you're not saying this, like there is value to stopping a rushing attack, especially if that's kind of a team's bread and butter. Like you go up against New England this season and you shut down Ramondre Stevenson and force the ball into Mac Jones' hands, I think you're going to have a much easier time. But I do agree that I think they're willing to give up those rushing yards, because to them, it's like, keep running, exhaust your O-line, exhaust your personnel, because when the time comes when you have to throw the ball, you're going to be shot and you're going to play right into our coverage's hands. So to that point,
the Cleveland game, Cleveland entered that game. Everybody's like, how are the Bills going to stop Nick Chubb? Well, they did a decent job shutting him down. If anything, that actually shows how the Bills can adjust to different styles, because that was a game where the Bills actually struggled stopping the pass, which was ironic because they knew they wanted to take – it's all about taking away the strength of whatever the team you're facing.
Yeah.
So not to derail this whole conversation, but just thought it was really interesting that after how last year played out, they basically doubled down on their thought process.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I want to find one comment here that's buried. So first off, this is slander. This is a lie, Thomas. My favorite quarterback of all time for the Bills is not Kelly Holcomb. It's Thad Lewis. It's Thad Lewis. Get it right. Please. Thank you.
Not that cool?
No, Thad Lewis. Listen, we're talking about goats on goats. Anyways, I'll give you my quick honorable mention list, and then we're going to talk about number one. Honorable mentions for me. Kyer Elam is one of my first ones because you just need strong, consistent cornerback to play. The same reasons I gave you for Trey are the same I could give you for Kyer. I want to see a step forward in his development. I want to see that CB2 position solidified. It feels like we haven't really had it. Once Wallace left, it felt like we were figuring out who could get it, and Elam started to, I guess, develop the way you'd like him to towards the end of the season. He had a very good playoff game against Miami. He's a physical corner, but can also play in zone. He could do a lot for you, which is why I want to see him man that CB2 position and hold it for the whole year with Benford as depth, and maybe even guys like Alex Austin, Dane Jackson, just kind of coming in as rotation. That's one. Rousseau is in my honorable mentions for all the reasons you guys said. Year 3 is huge. I think he's developing into a very good defensive end. A B-plus player, I think, is an appropriate grade for him right now. One of the best run-stopping DNs in the league. But now you're talking about his ability as a pass rusher. He was almost at 10 sacks if he stayed healthy, and the high ankle sprain derailed him. So I think this season, assuming he stays healthy, he could have a much more productive year. And that's huge for a defensive line that seems to be a little finicky when it comes to injuries and the over-reliance on Von Miller. And then we talk about Ed Oliver, another person I have on this list. Ed Oliver, in a contract year, this is a prove-it year for him, but his play on the interior is huge for the rest of the defensive line. As I've said, Ed Oliver to me is as good as what's around him. And that's, you could call that a criticism. You could call that a compliment. You could call that whatever you want to, because a lot of defensive tackles play as well as who's next to them. And it's very hard to be a single dominant force when you're playing on the inside of the line like Aaron Donald is, or Jeffrey Simmons, one of those freaks. So I do understand that you need people around him. But if the line's healthy, Ed Oliver has every opportunity to shine and make it even more productive. I want to see that out of him this year. I think it will make everything a lot better on the up front on the D-line, and that's why he's in my honorable mention. Guys, does your number one start with a V?
Correct.
Okay, so Von Miller. Yes, Von Miller is the number one. We don't even have to go around the rotation for this. It's as obvious as day. We know he's hurt and he's coming off the ACL tear. Von Miller, 8 sacks in his 12 games. He was literally the most dominant force on the defensive line. When he went down, they were able to hold up for a little bit, but then it kind of started falling apart when you realized you didn't have that consistent force coming off the edge. Teams were able to adjust, change the way they double teamed. It made things a lot harder for the Bills defensive line. It is so obvious, but Von Miller is our number one on this list, clear as day. Do you guys have any insight to provide on this number one that I might not have said?
Well, the great unknown with Von is what version of Von are we going to see this year? When is he going to come back? Are we going to see Von at 100%? Probably not. Are we going to see 90% Von? I think 90% Von would still be a solid player, above average defensive end that could get you some sacks and pressure. 80% Von? Well, then at that point, you're talking about maybe just another average defensive end on the outside. So I'm hoping when he does come back, we see some version of him that we're used to. It's so difficult because Von is always going to be positive, but you're talking about a 34-year-old that's coming off his second ACL injury. If he wasn't Von Miller, I think a lot of us would be talking about telling this guy to just hang it up and retire.
Back him up.
But because it's Von, we still have this optimism that hopefully he can return and be a version of himself that's still helpful to the Bills moving forward. But it's really hard because we have no idea what we're going to see once he returns to the field. I do think it's going to be before the halfway point of the season. I'm not going to bet week 1, week 2, but I do think it's a better chance of October than it is late November at this point, based on all the things he's saying and the fact that he's gone through this recovery before and should have an idea with previous rehab where his body needs to be at to come back on the field. And we'll see if the Bills can get 90+% Von. That'll be huge for them come playoff time and going forward. If not, their pass rush is going to continue to be an issue. And you think about it, this was a 6-year contract where he's with this restructure that took place over the offseason is basically a 4-year investment in him. Let's pray to God that Von is still close to what we hope he is. Otherwise, it could be a long couple years, especially with that salary on the books.
Yeah.
True. Yeah, no, very good points. Concerns are definitely valid. But just like for me, what he brings, like I do hope they're able to get some consistent pass rush without him, right? That is kind of the big defensive question on top of middle linebacker, what's going to happen there. But that is kind of one of the biggest questions is, are they going to be able to get consistent pass rush without Von Miller? But for me, like the thing is, when he ultimately does come back, you are just getting that closer, right? Like you think about how many times last season, right? The 8 games that he did play, or 11 games that he did play, he had 8 sacks. And just like how many of those came in the big moments, right? You just think back, you can think of like 2 or 3 off the top of your head, where it's just like late in the game, Bills need a sack, Von Miller's there. And
Kansas City game.
Yeah, that's exactly why they signed him, right? They said that how many times, like we need that guy late in games that we can trust to go out there and call game and, get that final sack and put the game away. And he did that when he did play. And I think it was like the Minnesota game, right? There was also a time where he called game and then, or it might've been the Jets game. I don't remember. Jets game. Yeah.
Again, I was there.
Game and Josh Allen, had his arm thing going on. So whatever, that he didn't technically call game, but yeah, Von Miller does what he can to end games for the Bills. And that's what they're going to be getting back really when he does get back in the lineup. Mike, I'm with you. I don't think they're getting 100% Von Miller this year, right? Like we talk about Tre'Davious White and how like last season people were kind of getting at him and like kind of souring on him because he's not the Trey White of old. It's like, okay, well, I don't want to get into Trey White, but like cornerback's a volatile position as it is. And like any athlete playing any sport, first year back from ACL tear is not going to be the same player, right? Like that never happens. And to expect it to happen is just unrealistic and unfair. So that's why I'm with you, Joe. I think Trey White this year is going to be much better than Trey White last year. And I don't even think he was bad last year.
No, he wasn't.
Relating that to Von Miller, right? Like to expect Von Miller to come back at any point this season and be Von Miller, especially at 34 years of age, is just unrealistic, right? So I do expect in general, he's not going to be what we saw at times last year in flashes, but I do think you still are going to get that game-ending closer, which is, again, why he is number one, just on top of what we've said.
Yeah, and even not just for a sack alone, but his presence on the line causes plays to happen. Like that final Mahomes interception was because Von was pressuring him on his side, and then he had to get the ball out, and he rushed it out, and Johnson was in position. Like those little things are so valuable for a good pass rusher. I think it was one of the things that Jerry Hughes brought to the table, but Jerry Hughes wasn't a closer. He was more just like he'll get close, but he'll never fully get there. Obviously, he had sacks. That's an exaggeration, but you know what I mean? Like Von Miller seals the deal, and Von Miller's like pressure is a part of his whole game, and it's so valuable for the Lion. It needs to come back this year. Not I want it to. It needs to come back this year. It's a tough schedule against some really good offenses, at least ones that are shaping up to be. I want to have our closer back. I don't expect him to be 100% right away, but I mean, listen, man, if this dude does play week 1, if he avoids the PUP, if he is ready to go, then I wouldn't be shocked if his play is ready to go too. I mean, one thing is I am not in medical at all. I'm not going to act like I ever have been. I am not. I am in sports. That's what I do. So I say this with the biggest grain of salt that's enough to make you thirsty. But Von's injury was an ACL tear that we found out about during surgery. It wasn't seen on any MRIs going into his surgery, right? So what I suspect is that people have said it's not a total reconstruction of the ligament. It's like just a minor repair. I'm wondering if the degree of how much he teared it affects how he's actually going to play the season, how long his recovery had to be, how much it's going to take to come back from. I don't know. I'm not going to act like I know, but with all the reports about how Von's recovering, how he's practicing, how he's already doing his isometrics with heavy weight, how, we'll see how he does when he gets on a field. I wouldn't be surprised. I am not saying this with certainty, but I would not be surprised if he is playing to at least close to his max potential week 1. If he isn't, it's fine by me. If they have to give him a few weeks to recover fully, to get back and to get going, we need him more down the stretch than we do for the opening part of the year. That I can guarantee you. And with that was our top 5 most important players, or in my case, Mike, top 6 most important players on the Bills defense. Gentlemen, do we have anything else we want to add to this list before we sign off for the week?
I'm all good.
I might as well just name the rest of the starters at this point. I think I've named most of them, either as players or as honorable mentions.
So let's add to the honorable mention. We'll add Poona Ford, Jordan Phillips.
Yeah.
We'll have to have AJ Epineza, Boogie Basham. Let's have Kyer, Christian Benford. Let's add a few more if you want to add any more.
Cam Lewis, Jamarcus Ingram. No, I'm just kidding.
Let's get to the practice squad in case.
Alex Austin.
I mean, who knows? Maybe he makes the team. Maybe he could play a game.
Right.
Judge kind of talked me into Alex Austin, so I'm kind of watching him. I want to see what he does. I mean, it's a late round DB. They always do well. So
no one loves
No
one loves late round players more than Judge and Kevin Masseri.
Like that's the thing. As you said, Joe, he's gonna be good. That's just how it goes, right?
Exactly.
Like if Bean and McDermott identify a late round DB, and again, no, we don't have sources on this, but just putting tea leaves together and figuring it all out, seems very obvious that the Bills drafted him because they wanted him as a UDFA, and he probably didn't see a path. So the Bills obviously wanted him and then drafted him so that he really didn't have a choice. He had to come.
Yeah.
You want a path? Forget about it. You're coming to us.
Right. Exactly. And I think, they identify their traits that they like in their late round DBs. They get their guys and then they develop them for 3 years. And then when we need Alex Austin to play, he's not going to miss a beat. That's just what happens in Buffalo. But Sean McDermott's not a good coach, according to the comment section.
Yeah, apparently
Horrible
not.
coach.
And
Horrible
listen,
coach.
I'm just picturing Sal. You guys know that gif where it's the one guy with the sword and it's a bunch of people on horses charging at this one guy with the sword. Is that from Game of Thrones? I never watched. I'm pretty sure that scene is from Game of Thrones. Correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't
watch either.
I'm glad I'm not the only one. Everyone gives me a dirty look when I say I don't watch that show.
It was a great show until the end.
That's
what I've heard.
That is what I've heard. And also, Twitter spoils everything for me, and Ryan spoiled Succession for me, so I don't even have to watch that either. That's great. Anyways, love you, Ryan. That's not a dig. Love you. That's not a dig.
But let's start this conversation again. We're gonna start a fight inside of one DM.
No, I'm over it. I haven't even watched the show. Anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining me today. If you have any last thing you want to plug for your show, anything coming up, feel free to do that now before we sign off. We'll go Kyle and then we'll go Mike. What do you got before we go?
You can follow me on Twitter at Kyle Salagi. Make sure to check out the Cover One Roundup this Monday, live trivia show hosted by, I guess I will technically be hosting, but David Fox is the one who, is kind of running the ship this week. It's his idea, his concept. He's writing the questions, all that good stuff. And also, you're a Cover One fan. You're watching this show. Make sure to check out cover1.football. Become an insider. A bunch of great content always going out over there, written, video, all that good stuff. So check that out.
Nice.
And then you can catch out the Going Deep podcast every Tuesday, 7:00. And myself and Kevin Masseri. We're entering the dead period of the off season, so this is the time where if anyone in the comment section ever wants to talk about anything, let us know. Ask us your questions. Get involved. This is where any show can go any number of directions. So it'll be fun the next couple of weeks before things get serious once again in late July.
Yeah. And guys, again, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a very fun discussion. You were a pleasure to have on. I really I love derailing from a conversation and script of a show. I want to stress, like, I never get upset about that. I think it's hilarious. And I'm really glad we had some kindling today. So that was fun. To all of you in our comment section that have joined us today for the live stream, first and foremost, thank you so much for contributing, your conversation, your trolling even. It was all very welcomed and appreciated. If you have not done so yet, please, please, please like this video and like other videos on Cover One's network. It really helps us out. It'll get us to the forefront of your algorithm if you are a Bills fan and allow you to see some of the excellent content that guys like Kyle, guys like Mike, and other guys in our network do for all of you each and every week. It's a lot of hard work that goes into this network, so it is appreciated when we can get any sort of feedback or contribution. Become an insider. You'll be a part of some internal discussions in our Slack channel. A lot of the times it's football debates. Sometimes you'll get some insider news. Who knows? Maybe. But it's a lot of fun, and it's something I think anyone who's a Bills fan is doing a disservice if they're not a part of it. So all of you, again, thank you so much. Please like the video. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your weekend. As Anthony says, be good to one another. Take care of one another. As Thomas says, life is too short. And as I say, go Bills. You guys have a great rest of your weekend, and we will see you soon.